This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome. You've heard and read the spin the media and the politicians have put on the issues of the day. To get the correct spin on what's going on in North Carolina, let's introduce you to our panel of experts. They include Linda Coleman, former director of the Office of State Personnel, former legislator, former candidate for lieutenant governor. Welcome.
Thank you.
John Hood from the John Locke Foundation, Chris Fitzsimon from NC Policy Watch, and Gene Arnold from Nash County, former legislator. Welcome back. This week we got a really full show, and we kick it off with the hot topic of the week, Governor McCrory's budget recommendations. We'll also discuss voter ID, the legislators' proposal to void the lease on Dorothea Dix, and if we get time, we'll talk about new problems at the Employment Security Commission. Should be a good and full show, so let's get started. Governor Pat McCrory has been talking about his vision for the state for some time, but this week we got specific when he presented his first state budget proposal. As you would expect, this is a detailed and lengthy document. In fact, this is it, and it's some 350 pages, about 350 pages long. But we wanted to get our panelists' early reaction to his proposed $20.6 billion general fund budget. He would increase money to the rainy day fund, add to the considerable funding to the repair and renovation funds. In education, hire 1,800 more teachers and fund 5,000 more at-risk children in pre-K programs. Teachers and state employees get a 1% pay increase, and he would fully fund Medicaid. 5 prisons would be closed, 900 employee positions would be cut, 5 state-funded historic sites would be taken dormant, and some programs, such as the NC Rural Center, would be cut. I want to ask all the panelists to give the governor's budget a letter grade and tell us what you like and what you don't like about it. John Hood, we'll start with you.
Tom, I'd give the budget an A-. I think it makes some wise fiscal decisions. It puts more money into repair and renovation of state buildings, which are in disrepair. It shores up the state's reserves. It spends money economically, given not a lot of revenue growth. So that's why I give it.
Linda Coleman.
I'd give the budget a C-. What I like about it is it funds the drug treatment court. It expands the at-risk kids, and it adds teachers. It gives pay raises. What I don't like about it is that it takes away the earned income tax credit, where the low-income families take a hit. It also cuts money from our university system, which is the economic engine, as well as the community college system. That's going to spur tuition increases, as well as laden our students with debt.
Chris?
I think I'd give it a C. This is not a radical budget either way. This is this sort of keeps North Carolina treading water. The problem is it keeps us treading water after 4 years of budget cuts. You mentioned that it added 1,800 teachers. It also let go 3,000 teaching assistants or teacher assistants in our public schools. And in fact, it spends about $358 million more than last year, but it actually doesn't keep services at the same level. Education will be funded slightly less if you consider all the things you have to add, enrollment, inflationary increases. Only health and human services will be funded sort of at a little bit higher level, the average service level. But I do agree that the drug courts were good. I was struck by the fact that Governor McCrory restored a lot of things like the drug courts and some other things that the Republican General Assembly cut. So part of this was sort of redoing, sort of saying to North Carolina that the HAVA funds for the Board of Elections, for example, things that the Republican General Assembly decided weren't important, the governors thought they were important.
Yeah. Gene, you're
I'd
great.
give it an A because there are no new taxes, no new debt, and no special provisions. Isn't that wonderful? The estate tax dies, thank heavens. What I would not like about it I think we could have funded the community colleges with a little bit more. But I think they have put together a good, balanced budget.
John, I think the question on everybody's mind is how well did the governor follow through on his campaign promises, his agenda that he talked about during the campaign?
Well, I think whether you agree with his campaign agenda or not, this budget is essentially consistent with it. For example, he talked a lot in the campaign, and as governor has already talked a lot more about the career and technical education issue. And I believe there's about $60 million in 2 different funds looking at that area in the community colleges primarily. He talked a lot about how state government itself was being mismanaged and there were structural problems with the budget. And obviously a lot of what this is about is, in fact, not launching a lot of new big initiatives, but trying to fix buildings, fix programs, get things in better shape so you can consider whatever you're going to do in the future. So I think those are illustrations of this budget reflecting what Governor McCrory said he was going to do.
The governor added money for repair and renovation and rainy day funding. These, as a result of the recent budget shortfalls, have been cut. As a matter of fact, he said that the rainy day fund would get up to $800 million, which is the largest it's ever been before. Good idea?
Absolutely.
In this tight budget time?
Yeah, and he also has had put, counting that $400 million in the rainy day fund, another $139 million. So he's got a lot of money in reserve that can be used, and also to go ahead and pay, as you said, for the Medicaid problems. But I think what the governor is teaching us and what the General Assembly taught us is that what these guys say they're going to do, they by golly are going to do it. He fulfilled, to me, all of his campaign promises and addressed those issues. So I think it's right on.
Chris, talk about the pay increase. I mean, at 1% pay increase, state employees have not had much in the way of pay increases, particularly so far as teachers are concerned when they're already ranked 48th in the nation. Is that going to be satisfactory?
No, I mean, I don't think so, and I think that's what I was referring to when I think this budget doesn't take us forward, certainly. It sort of takes us sideways or maybe a step back. I mean, I do think if, as we said on this show recently, if you have to work 14 years as a beginning teacher to make $40,000 a year, and then we're wondering, Senate President Pro Tem Phil Berger wondering why we're having trouble keeping qualified teachers in the classroom, I would point him to that as one idea. I wish the governor had found some money to do that.
John, in years past, the governor's budget has been basically dead on arrival as soon as it hits the steps of the legislature. Governor McCrory went to some great lengths to explain the fact that this was a collaborative kind of budget. He had consulted with UNC President Tom Ross. He had talked with the community colleges. He talked with Superintendent Atkinson. He'd had conversation with the budget leaders over in the House and the Senate. How's it going to be received over there?
I think that fairly well, but there'll be some differences. There always are. I mean, we exaggerate sometimes this idea the governor's budget is dead on arrival. Most of what any governor proposes gets adopted by the legislature. The differences are actually usually on the margins rather than the meat and potatoes. In this particular case, we've had in the past either a Democratic governor and a Republican legislature the last 2 years, or we had Democratic governors with kind of frosty relationships with Democratic legislators. So it's been a while since we've had a really collaborative process between the governor and the legislature. I don't know how long it'll last, but right now I think most of what's in Governor McCrory's budget will probably end up being made law.
To your point, I think that this budget is one that I'm pleased to see that the governor and the legislature are going to take full responsibility for it, because in previous years when the budget has come to the General Assembly, there's always been talk of it's a bloated budget, it's inflated because it was a Democratic governor for the most part. But now we see that the budget actually, there's an increase in it over past years. And I'm glad to see that the governor believes that North Carolina is worth investing in.
That was surprising to a lot of people.
What?
That it was spending more money than
yeah,
last year.
I think that the main thing to think about the governor's budget, whoever it is this becomes this frames the entire debate. The decisions the legislature makes now, as John referenced, are based on this budget. That's why it's so important. What they'll do is they'll make changes to this budget. They won't come up with one on their own. One thing we haven't talked about, I disagree a little bit. I think there are some frosty relationships. I mean, the governor asked the Senate to slow down on the Charlotte Airport bill. They didn't do it. He asked them to slow down on Medicaid. They didn't do it. They came up with this appointments bill, which he said he didn't know anything about. So there's a lot of things going on over there. And one place that I think we'll see some division is the governor, to his credit, recommended $10 million for eugenics victims. The House has been a strong supporter of that. There are people in Raleigh that believe that's dead on arrival in the Senate.
Gene, there's another issue at play in here, and that is that this budget involved very heavily, and those of us who've been around for a while can see Art Pope's hand in the writing of this budget. In fact, at the press conference, Pope was very effective in explaining this budget to people. When it goes over to the legislature, Art Pope has helped fund the elections of an awful lot of these folks is it going to carry a little bit more weight over there?
Absolutely. In fact, I interpreted some of the comments made by members of the House and Senate as almost relief that they were getting a budget from the governor that they could work from and not have to come up with their own budget.
Right. Well, we often have people ask us how they can watch a show that they've missed or see one for a second time on NC Spin. Well, it's easy. All you got to do is go to our website, ncspin.com, or NC Spin on Facebook, NC Spin on YouTube. And all during the week when you go there, our panelists and our viewers are sounding off with their opinions on the week's events, so be sure to be a part of the conversation. ncspin.com, NC Spin on Facebook, NC Spin on YouTube. When we come back, we're going to talk about voter ID.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
Before NC lawmakers tackle immigration reform, they need to understand it's a billion-dollar issue. State legislatures in Georgia and Alabama have passed stringent laws that have decimated their agribusiness economy, leaving crops in the field to die and costing their farmers millions of dollars in lost revenue. Before we hurt our farmers, let's think about a responsible immigration policy that works. Prosperous farms create good jobs right here at home. Paid for by NC Farm Bureau.
North Carolina is a great place to live, work, and raise a family, but we consistently rank in the bottom third for state health. Poor health choices and inactivity cost our state $54 billion a year, dollars that could be saved through healthier living. We can do better, North Carolina. That's why NC Spin is working with health and community organizations to launch A Healthier NC, an education campaign and challenge to live healthier lives. Join us at ahealthierNC.com.
We now return to NC Spin.
The biggest issue to emerge so far in this legislative session has been voter identification. The rhetoric has been pointed and partisan and confusing. House Speaker Tom Tillis said last week the measure isn't primarily to escape voter fraud. NAACP President William Barber says this is a modern-day poll tax. The average voter is trying to figure out why everybody's so exercised. Let me ask you. Democrats in the NAACP say voter ID is nothing but a way to prevent minorities from voting. Help us understand why they're so opposed to having an ID.
Well, in the first place, this started out as a fraud prevention bill, and then it was determined that there was very little fraud there to be looked at. And now it's gone to elections integrity. Many of us believe that it's a solution in search of a problem, and that the real problem with the integrity is in the process. And I could not agree with Representative Lewis more when he says that they will ensure that if there is enough time and that if there is enough commitment to the process and enough outreach, that they will ensure that every voter will have an opportunity to exercise their vote. However, that is the horse. The cart is the bill. And what we're doing is really putting the cart before the horse. and because what we're saying is, in fact, that you are guilty until proven innocent. And so we need to look at this in the right way and do the outreach, spend the time, commit to the process, and look at that, because I will tell you that if we think we have problems with provisional ballots now, we haven't seen anything
yet. Well, Gene,
yet.
I asked on our website, I asked our panelists to comment last week on voter ID, and you quoted Shakespeare when you said this is much. I was impressed. I didn't know you knew what Shakespeare. Much ado about nothing.
That's exactly the way I see it. I think if there was any scheme underneath this, it might have been that people of the legislature were resenting folks going in with a pre-printed ballot on what how to vote. But any person, Democrat, Republican, Independent, can pick up a sample ballot from the poll workers and mark it whatever way they want to, or determine how they want to vote. So I still think it's much ado about nothing.
John, one of the big question marks that voter ID doesn't resolve is absentee ballots. I mean, when you got no way of being able to prove who's voting absentee. You know who you send it to, but you don't know where it comes back.
Well, that's true, though actually there are states that use IDs, including photo IDs, as part of the absentee ballot process. Copies of photo IDs are sent in with absentee ballots and things like that. So you could even, I would like to see something like that done in the North Carolina legislation. I think it's been obvious for a couple of years that we were going to have some kind of voter ID bill pass. And there's going to be some kind of arrangements and accommodations made for people who do not currently have government-issued IDs to either get them or use expired licenses or something. I think that's where we'll end up, but we will spend a couple of years yelling in the process.
Well, in the process of all this, Chris, we're hearing, okay, you could use a driver's license or an expired driver's license or a student ID card or a military ID card or any form of government-issued ID. Isn't there a chance for corruption there?
Well, first of all, we haven't seen the bill. We don't know. Speaker Tillis has mentioned that he's open to those things. That's right. But, Speaker Tillis last session said pointedly at a town hall meeting that they had real concerns about the effect of the voter ID bill on people in the disability community, people with disabilities. People came to him and said they have legitimate concerns, and he was worried about that, but he passed the bill anyway that didn't address those concerns. So hopefully he learned his lesson, number one. Number two, Linda's exactly right that this has really changed. I think the speaker basically acknowledged on national television that there really isn't a voter fraud problem. The other thing that's pretty clear, whether you believe the Board of Elections numbers, I think they're probably high. Let's assume they said there are 500,000 people maybe don't have a photo ID. Let's say it's 40% of that. There's 200,000 people. Most of them are seniors. Most of them are disabled. It's very difficult for them to get a photo ID. We're still trying to do this to suppress the vote of some people. And the last point is the reason that doesn't affect absentee ballots is Republicans are more likely to use absentee ballots than Democrats.
John, I wrote a column about this, and I said essentially this has become a poster child for partisan politics. Why is that?
Because there are strongly felt opinions on both sides. There are people who believe that voter fraud is a serious concern and would never be detected because you don't have a photo ID requirement from which to start an investigation. There are people who think it's all made up and it's a voter suppression tactic. Both sides passionately believe they're right. The truth of the matter is, it is, in fact, a guarantee that most countries use, many states use, will end up doing it, but it's probably not very prevalent. Voter fraud is probably not very prevalent.
And most people in North Carolina say, hey, we're majoring in minors. We got bigger fish to fry and we got bigger problems. When we come back, we're going to talk about the Dix lease.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
Not all high school graduates go to college. Not all employers need college graduates. Are North Carolina's public schools preparing graduates with the skills employers need now? Join the discussion. Visit nceducate.com.
North Carolina.
We now return to NC Spin.
The land was given for a state mental hospital, and for 100 years, Dorothea Dix proudly ministered to the mentally ill. But in a reform in mental health treatment around the 2000s, coupled with the need for major renovation at Dix and a legislative vendetta, signaled the closing of this once proud institution. And for months prior to the closing, there's been discussion about what to do with this valuable 300 acres of land in downtown Raleigh. A large percentage of the Department of Health and Human Services employees are housed on the campus, but a group of leading citizens urged the land be turned into a destination park. Many urged a go-slow approach, but in the closing weeks of her administration, Governor Bev Perdue announced a lease deal with the city of Raleigh. Republicans screamed it was a bad deal for taxpayers and just recently introduced legislation to negate the lease, provoking outcries from the city and the support group of Democrats who were opposing most anything Republicans favored. Question one to Gene. Democrats are screaming the state can't go back on its word. Republicans are saying it's a bad deal, and they tried to get Perdue to listen to them, and she insisted on cutting it anyway, and it must be changed. What's your take?
Exactly that. It's unfair to jump on the General Assembly and the Republicans because the deal was put together in haste to benefit Raleigh. Now, when we oppose that, it's okay, it's a bad thing and the Republicans are bad people. There's room for both offices and a park. And you can certainly do that with a great deal of ease, and both sides win. That's the solution to it as far as I'm concerned.
John, help me understand. Are the opponents to this, the people that are trying to renege on this deal, are they upset because of the price?
That's primarily it.
Or is it because of the proposed use?
No, I think most of them are comfortable with most or all or whatever, some good chunk of that land becoming a park. They simply think the taxpayers of North Carolina were not paid a sufficient amount. Either they should be paid up front or a more significant lease payment. I mean, this is a sweetheart. This is a lease payment off 50, 60 years off into the future, way lower than it should be. This land, this hospital was built for the purposes of treating people with mental disabilities, mental illnesses. What you could do is take some of the proceeds and use it to organize the HHS staff in a new facility, use the rest of the proceeds for Medicaid or mental health spending, and the local folks will still get their part. But Linda, that's the deal that should have been made.
Linda, you were part of state government for many, many years, and you probably remember when the Council of State approved the fact that any growth in state government was going to take place on this Dix property. We were going to keep the DHHS employees there. What's caused that to change? Why has the thinking changed that we shouldn't continue to use this as state land?
For one thing, you know, the Central Hospital was built over in Butner. We always felt that portion...
Primarily because people were upset with Wake County legislators and wanted to get even with them.
That's true. However, we always felt that part of that land should have been available for the patients over at Dix. We wanted to keep the original intent of that land as true as we could. Because, for one thing, the patients in Wake County have to travel now. And as you have heard, and no doubt in today's newscast, that Raleigh is the fastest growing city in the entire nation. And of course, when you have population growth, you also have other portions of the population increasing, which means our mental patients will increase as well. And now we've got to transport them over to Central
Mayor
Park.
Nancy McFarland said, hey, look, whether you like the deal or not, the city of Raleigh and the state entered into this deal in good faith. The state entered into the agreement, and they should have to be forced to keep their word. What do you think?
I think the mayor has a point, and I think we're starting to see a little bit of this General Assembly, which is you're appointed to the Utilities Commission. They say you have an 8-year term, then they come around and say, oh, no, you're going to be kicked off in 2 years or 4 years. We sign a contract with the city of Raleigh, a binding legal contract. Nobody's suggesting it's illegal. Now the General Assembly comes in and says, oh, wait, we're going to take back that contract. So I'm not sure why people would want to do business with the state. The next General Assembly or somebody in the leadership gets in a bad mood and you lose your whole deal. Number 3, Governor McCrory said in his transition period, he was asked about it at a press conference, and he said, I support this. She's the governor, and I support it. And it's not just Democrats who are for it. There are a lot of...
No, he didn't say he supported it.
Yes, he did.
What he said was, she's the governor. She can make that call.
No, he also said he supported the idea of a
park.
He did not say he supported this particular deal.
Well, and the last thing is, it's not just Democrats supporting it. There are a lot of prominent Republicans. Governor McCrory was on the Friends of Dix Park, was part of that when he was a candidate.
I myself on that.
Well, I mean, he's been supportive in the past of this idea, and prominent Republicans are supportive of it in Raleigh. This is a contract that the state ought to guarantee and ought to hold it up.
All right. When we come back, Employment Security Commission problems.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
North Carolina is a great place to live, work, and raise a family, but we consistently rank in the bottom third for state health. Poor health choices and inactivity cost our state $54 billion a year, dollars that could be saved through healthier living. We can do better, North Carolina. That's why NC Spin is working with health and community organizations to launch a Healthier NC, an education campaign and challenge to live healthier lives. Join us at ahealthiernc.com.
We now return to NC Spin.
Concerned that our Employment Security Commission was not operating effectively, Governor Bev Perdue recommended the program be consolidated into the Department of Commerce. How's that working out for us? Federal records show a year ago the agency was accurate in determining initial eligibility benefits for 27% of the time. But most recently, it's dropped to 12% of the time. For those seeking to continue benefits, it was accurate 47%, up from 39% at the end of 2011. Not long ago, we discussed the fact the agency had overpaid benefits by over $100 million. Chris, former Representative Dale Falwell has been placed in charge of the Employment Security Commission. He claims that there are systemic problems in the agency And every dollar we save in waste and fraud is a dollar can go to pay benefits. What's your take on this news?
Well, I hope that that's right. I hope that if waste and fraud is identified and then it's used to pay benefits, although I don't think this is necessarily fraud if somebody gets benefits that they're not entitled to accidentally through no fault of their own, if it's not a willful situation. The unemployment system is very important in North Carolina. We need to do it right, but I think some of the times when the calculations are made, it's not always in the person's favor who's getting the benefits.
John, have we ever heard any explanation for why this dropped from 27% down to 12%?
No, there have been discussions of their software, their computer system, that sort of thing. I have confidence in Dale Falwell, who's been, as you mentioned, chosen as the new head of employment security. I think he knows this is near the top of his list of things to get done quickly.
Linda, some people are saying, hey, let's cut these folks some slack. We got 9.5 million people in North Carolina. 300, 400,000 more, 600,000 are unemployed. That's a lot of records to keep up with, a lot of payments to be processing. There's room for error there.
Yes, there is room for error, as there is in any program. And what we do is we try to put in safeguards that will reduce or eliminate those errors. That doesn't always happen, but we have to continue to try to see what the issues are.
All right, Gene, real quick, what's the takeaway from this story? What can we expect to happen?
Well, I think they'll try to fix it. I think it is systemic. And there has to be a cure from the very beginning through.
Well, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed during the week, give us your feedback and read our column. Visit our website, ncspin.com. Catch NC Spin on Facebook. And we hope you'll join us next week when our Easter program will discuss turf battles between cities and the legislature, whether it's time to resume executions. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
Join us next week and get the spin on issues facing our state.